Добар ден. Мислам дека можеме да почнуваме полека. Почитувани присутни, Ваши екселенции, панелисти, членови на управниот одбор на фондацијата, колеги од граѓанските организации, медиуми, добар ден. Денеска имам чест да ја отворам првата конференција во рамки на овој неколку неделен пресек на одбележување на 25 годишнината од Фондацијата Отворено општество Македонија во Македонија. Со оваа конференција која неслучајно, како за прва, го носи насловот "Зошто Европа и зошто сега?" Фондацијата Отворено општество Македонија од самото основање, особено последниве 15 години, сериозно се занимава и го поддржува процесот на европска интеграција на Македонија и тогаш, кога на тој план Македонија беше многу успешна и тогаш кога бевме помалку успешни, да не речам, патот беше и блокиран. Веќе 25 години се залагаме за динамично и толерантно граѓанско општество, за силни и активни граѓани, за отчетни и одговорни институции и особено заради ова последново, отчетни и одговорни институции, не многу ретко сме не толку омилени кај властите. Со оваа регионална конференција, освен што сакаме да го одбележиме јубилеот, практично сакаме да ја одбележиме и 2018 година како година на шансата. Сметаме дека 2018 може да биде година на шансата за Македонија, но воедно година на шансата за целиот регион. И затоа денеска овде сме собрани голем број представници на реномирани граѓански организации и think-танкови од целиот регион, затоа што идејата ни беше со овој денешен собир да упатиме порака или препорака до она што ќе се случува помеѓу 16 и 18 мај во Софија, кога се одржува самитот помеѓу Европската Унија и државите на Западен Балкан. Сметаме дека е многу важно граѓанското општество да биде активен чинител во овој процес. Граѓанското општество многу често има различни размислувања и различни ставови околу прашања за кои што ќе се водат преговорите, од ставовите кои што ќе ги има Европската Унија и од ставовите кои што ќе ги имаат властите во државите. Но само така, само со напори на градење на минимум консензус, да не речем, околу одредени клучни прашања, можеме да сметаме дека процесот ќе заврши со успех и дека навистина европската интеграција нема да биде само една техничка операција на чекирање на тоа што сме завршили од зададените задачи, туку ќе биде процес кој што навистина ќе значи европеизација на нашите општества. Сакам да ви ги представам трите панели на кои што ќе разговараме денеска овде. Значи, првиот панел, кој што носи наслов "Пристапување преку владење на правото", ќе го отвори нашата членка на управниот одбор Наташа Габер Дамјановска и ќе го модерира, а на него учество ќе земат панелистите Чери Магич од Европската иницијатива за стабилност, Меджак од Европското движење Србија и Стојковски од Евротинк од Македонија, и господинот Вебер од Центарот за политики и демократизација од Берлин. На вториот панел, кој што носи наслов "Алтернативни играчи" или позајмивме практично наслов на еден наш драг колега Димитар Бечев "Alternative Powers", панелистите Стефанов од Европскиот совет за надворешни односи од Бугарија, Муслиу, аналитичар од Македонија, Јакшич, аналитичар од Србија и Илјаудес од Елкано Ројал институтот од Мадрид, ќе пробаат да одговорат на прашањето каква е ситуацијата и кои се вистинските закани за Европа и европеизацијата. По нив на панелот билатерални спорови, мислам дека овој ќе биде еден од поинтересните и мислам дека ова прашање е многу важно. Панелистите Маличи, политички аналитичар од Косово, Армаколас, нашиот драг пријател, политички аналитичар од Елија Меп од Грција, Господја Митрева, поранешна министерка за надворешни работи на Република Македонија, и ЕЛЕК од Белградскиот центар за безбедносни политики ќе ги дадат своите видувања на прашањето дали земјите од регионот има можност да се договорат на конечни и обврзувачки решенија кои што ќе ги решат билатералните спорови. Овој панел ќе го модерира Санта Аргирова, членка на управниот одбор на фондацијата. Многу ми е жал што денеска утрово морам во името на министерот за надворешни работи Димитров и министерката Екатерина Захариева да ви соопштам, односно да го извинам нивното отсуство, односно неслучувањето на последниот панел, од причини што средбата во Грција, на кој што домаќини се господинот министер за надворешни работи Коцијас, се одолжи повеќе од иницијално планираното. Беше планирано да се заврши со ручек денеска во 1. Веројатно разговорите добро течат, се надевам, и ручекот е продолжен да трае до 4, така што практично се во неможност да стасаат навреме за овој наш панел. И мене ми е многу жал што нема да може да ги слушнеме, но еве во вакви турбулентни времења се случуваат и такви работи. Ви се извинувам за оваа непријатност. И сега сакам да ги најавам нашите први гости, воведничари на ова отворање. И тоа пред се сакам да му дадам збор прво на господинот Жорди Вакер, регионалниот директор за Европа на Фондацијата Отворено општество и ко-директор на Европската иницијатива за отворено општество со седиште во Барселона. Долг пријател на Македонија, уште од пред времето да биде во ОСФ и голем познавач на европските политики и состојби. И да го поздравам господинот Лукаш од делегацијата на Европската комисија Европската унија, во Македонија, кој што во името на делегацијата и на амбасадорот денеска ќе ги представи погледите за тоа како Европската унија во Македонија гледа на процесот и како гледа на улогата на граѓанското општество. Ви благодарам, Жорди повели.
Благодарам, thank you. Good morning, everyone. The choice of the title, Why Europe, Why Now, is, I think, suitably provocative and a very good place to start this conference. First, because too often enlargement and pre-enlargement preparations are just taken for granted. And I think it's a good thing to interrogate them. But I also think the why now is an important addition to the question. If you sit in this part of Europe and if you look at the effects of being a member of the European Union on some countries that are close to this one, it is, I think, legitimate to wonder. So, to the east, if you look at Bulgaria and what a Bulgarian worker makes, for example, in their monthly salary, and how many people in Bulgaria still live under the poverty line, how many children in Bulgaria are well under the poverty line, but also if you look at the institutional setup of the country and the problems with capture of the parts of the state, corruption and others, I think it is legitimate to wonder whether accession was really the solution to Bulgarian problems. Now, if you look south to Greece and you look at the situations that the country has been enduring in the last, I'd say 6 years, even a bit more, perhaps 8 years, how being part of the euro, which seemed to be a great achievement of Greece, has become, to some extent, a curse for a number of people, young Greeks who look for a job, Greek families who really struggle to finish, to get to the end of the month, Greek pensioners who, with their very meager pensions, have to keep a whole family going. but also a certain deterioration in the standards of values and democracy in Greece. If you look at Hungary, which is not your direct neighbor, but was for some time a model of your prime minister, you even had Viktor Orban here publicly supporting Macedonia. And if you look at the level of authoritarianism that has crept into the system inside the watch of the EU institutions, if you look at the way in which free press, critical NGOs, an independent judiciary, and other crucial parts of an open society are being not just kind of slightly undermined, but very directly threatened by the government, you also may wonder whether this European Union, the European Union that has allowed so much suffering for the Greek economy, so little improvement of the Bulgarian institutions, and such a steady deterioration of open society values in Hungary, is the institution that you now want to join as Macedonians, right? And if one starts with the pessimistic version, which is a very European thing to do, and a very Southeast European thing to do, which start with the worst case, right? I think the first option, or the first kind of argument that I would give to you is, I also question the European Union, but to me it's unquestionable that those who are against and speak against the European Union are not the people who think and feel like I do. And this is the case in Germany, this is the case in France, this is the case in old members of the EU, and this is also the case of aspiring members and people outside. Listen to the motivations to be against the EU, look at the ulterior motives of the people who want to do this, and it's probably people who don't want to have more oversight on how they manage a country. It's often people who are caught in nationalism and in romantic stories about sovereignty. It's sometimes people who are bought or very closely to being bought by countries that have their own geopolitical interests in the region. And it's very often, in the case of Western Europe, extremely opportunistic characters that care very little about the long-term perspective. And I tend to say that some people try to characterize the Front National in France, or UKIP, other parties of the new radical right, FPÖ in Austria, as fascists. I always say they're not fascists. Fascists were people who looked to the future. It was a dystopian future, it was a horrific future, but they were looking to the future. These are parties of nostalgia. These are parties that don't have a future for their countries. They only have a past, and they're completely caught in it. And so I don't want to be deterministic that the future can only be European and there's no future. What I'm saying is that the people who are caught in idealized, actually, versions of the past are not the people who will offer something interesting instead of Europe. And that's the second reason, a bit more positive. So it's not only that those who opposed Europe are probably not the people that we want to be with. The second one is that what do the alternatives look like? And one part of the issue is alternatives to Europe and to the EU integration may look good if you are an oligarch who doesn't want his monopolies challenged and who doesn't want the chronic capitalism in their countries to have to compete in an open European space under very strict rules of the EU. There's all this side of people. And the alternative model that I present, we know it, we see it. And it's not a model of prosperity for everyone. It's a model of prosperity for the few. And it's not a model of security and certainty. It's actually a model of arbitrary use of power. Sometimes there is this cultural argument, right? Our culture is different, and therefore, we don't want to be governed by these people in Brussels who think differently. They're gonna force gay marriage upon us. They're gonna make our cities look like London with people from the whole world, and we don't like that. We like our city to look like our own people. And this kind of way of presenting scenarios, which I don't find so bad, but presenting them as the horror. Frankly, we see what the alternatives are. The alternatives are places where if you protest because your children are not getting adequate schooling, you may be put in prison, you may lose your job, you are at the complete mercy of people who use their positions to get connections, to get clientelistic networks. And if you have any doubts about this, look at the countries that have completely abandoned their path to go towards Europe. And look if the path they took afterwards is a path of more openness, of more social concerns, or is a path that is exemplified by Azerbaijan, that's exemplified by Russia, and that's exemplified by Erdogan's Turkey. But I don't think negative views, or just to say the alternatives are not very good, are enough. I think there's positive reasons why Europe is important, and it's a good choice now. And so let me finish in a more positive note. And the traditional image for the pre-accession process is, it's a bit like jogging, running, right? So if you run to get somewhere, it can, it's satisfying to get somewhere. You just want to arrive. But in fact, you're doing it because you want to keep fit, right? What's important is the running, is not the getting there. And to some extent, the traditional justification that we all say is, we now know being a new member state is not paradise. We now know it's not going to solve the issues that the country has not solved for itself. It did not solve the issues that Greece had with the public management of its accounts. It did not manage the issues that Bulgaria had with the solidity of institutions or the social conservative exploitation of the Hungarian national feelings, right? That was not solved. But the road to becoming a candidate actually makes you fit. And what does make you fit mean? Now, I am no fan of Poland and Hungary at this moment, but I still believe that the solidity of everyday institutions in these countries is well ahead of those of candidate countries. And to have solid everyday management of institutions, that's not a small thing. To have a public administration that understands the complexity of policy issues and is able to deliver in a really complex institutional system like that of the EU, that's really important. And sometimes we just think a lot of black and white, liberally liberal, but the everyday bread and butter issues of competence, of administrative capacity and of ability are built to a large extent through this process. Now, I'm not just going to say pre-accession is all that counts and the day after doesn't count. The day after does count. And it does count because Macedonia or Bosnia or Kosovo or any other country in the region has known for a long time that they don't depend on themselves. You are not a country that can decide on yourself what to do with your role in the world. Not that France and Germany can either. They also have realized that. And so if you're already interdependent, if you are already caught in these global networks you may as well have a seat at the table and participate in the decisions. Not just because your vote's going to count. It's not going to count that much. But more importantly, because it forces societies and it forces political systems to think about issues once you are inside the EU in ways that countries would not do otherwise. Listen, this is, to me, one of the big issues of Europe. Why is Europe obsessed with immigration when the reality of more than half of the countries of Europe, the big tragedy is emigration, depopulation, and aging? Part of it is because we are not thinking about the real issues of the future, right? We're just thinking about the present things. When you are in the EU, many of these debates are forced upon you. You have to decide, what's your attitude towards excess usage of plastic? What's your attitude about data privacy? What's your attitude about, climate change, robotization, and all these things? And being part of the European debates is the best way for a country like Macedonia to actually be sure that they are not self-centered, thinking about the same issues as always, and a completely captured system with a slow kind of repetitions of the same debates over years. You just have to be part there. You have to participate in these debates as a society and as a government. Let me finish by saying that the European Union is not going to solve, and I've said it before, the problems that countries have not solved before, right? But I don't see in any other part of the world a political project that is so contaminated by values, so sophisticated in terms of the political process, and also one that penetrates so deep into society. So if you care about these three things, if you care about values, if you care about a good polity, and if you care about international relations that have people at the center and not only the government's interest, I think Europe, the EU accession, still is not just the least bad of the options, but actually positively the option that offers the best prospects for a country that has opted for open society, that has opted for being accountable to its government, and has opted not necessarily for becoming as rich as Sweden, but certainly for becoming a country that does offer opportunities to its citizens to do something else than pack and go to Germany, Italy, or wherever it is. So that's my message. Not only Europe made sense in the good years, Europe still continues to make sense now. Thank you.
Благодарам, Jordi. Lucas, повелете.
Yes, dear Fanny, dear Jordi, dear colleagues and friends, what a great day and what a great place to meet today, and what a great topic to discuss. And after Jordi, it's very easy for me to continue. So thank you for the introductory remarks. I would like to focus on three issues. One is the role of civil society. The second issue is a bit to look at the region and the regional cooperation, and the last point to leave you with a few reflections for you for the future to think about. I would like to highlight that civil society can foster both regional and EU integration processes. There is a high volume of expertise in civil society, as well as capacities across the Western Balkans region. This could, and in my view, should be used by the governments to the benefit of the citizens, and also increasing the awareness and the knowledge of the administration to deal what tend to be rather complex processes of the reform and of the integration. In my view, it's expertise which can achieve the integration objectives, hopefully in medium term, and can help governments ahead of the intensive work which is ahead of us now at the Sofia summit, but ultimately for the June Council meetings in Brussels. But civil society has also another role to play than just the expertise. It needs to be a watchdog of governments, state institutions, as well as parliaments, albeit parliaments being elected by citizens. It needs to help with proper checks and balances. At the same time, I deeply believe it is critical that the civil society is cautious not to fall into one or the other political camp. I know it is difficult, as ultimately some of the work of the civil society is in fact political. However, it is critical to avoid it, and thus avoiding being compromised in views and eyes of the general public. I think it's the values and principles which underpin the EU integration process that can help in this regard. For as long these principles and values are safeguarded in your work, the EU will stand by you. Ladies and gentlemen, the first important landmark to test the readiness of the whole region for EU integration is in fact the upcoming Sofia summit, where the leaders from the region and EU leaders are going to meet. Again, there is a lot that can be learned from the civil society, where you cooperate across the borders, where you work on concrete projects, analysis, studies, which is really to the benefit of increasing understanding, but also practical benefits of the citizens in the countries. Evidence shows that good neighborly relations can make a real difference, not only on paper. For example, the recently concluded friendship agreement between Sofia and Skopje has had a positive on trade exchange. But we also hear it has a positive impact on the exchange and cooperation of the citizens, of the civil society. Again, the digital summit here in Skopje involving the region, where different stakeholders met and discussed practical problems, practical issues, showed that benefits in the regional cooperation can be tangible and can have a positive impact. Ladies and gentlemen, I will use this opportunity with presence of you from the region, but also from colleagues from member states, to introduce a challenge for you. A challenge that perhaps you can reflect in your future similar gatherings. And it is a difficult question, and there is no ready-made answer to this question. But I believe it is an important question that it starts to be discussed, particularly in the countries aspiring to join the EU. The question is, what is your contribution to the EU once you join? And this topic is important for the citizens within the EU, and many of the citizens are likely to vote in referendum about the question whether your country should join or shouldn't join, and perhaps with your reflection should be informed what is it in it for them that you become a member of the Union. Additionally, I think the debate on what is it there in the process for your own citizens in your own countries is another aspect to reflect on and continue the discussions. Yes, today there is a relatively high, depending on the countries in the region, support for the EU integration process. In some, where perhaps people would wish it's higher, it has increased over the past period. but we should not take it for granted, and we in the EU, we don't take it for granted. I think it is important to discuss with the citizens where else than in the EU you can be part of something global and enjoy being local. Where else can you enjoy new experiences and retain your identity? Where else can you be free and feel protected, cherish your traditions and embrace innovation? For me, the answer is clear. It's in the European Union. Ladies and gentlemen, Western Balkans has always been on Europe's map, throughout history, for good or bad. Let me conclude by replying to the conference title by saying, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holub. Продолжуваме, се извинувам, со првиот панел, кој што е прв и во вистинска смисла кога станува збор за напредокот во европските интеграции, а тоа е како до вистинско владење на правото. Централна тема и кај Европската унија и кај нас овде дома. Повелете.